Hello and welcome. I am Shushai Adana and you are watching Arma Media. It is an honor to once again host Martin Plaut, a renowned journalist, author, and leading authority on the Horn of Africa. Mr. Plaut, thank you very much indeed for joining us once again for this second interview. In this discussion, we will concentrate on four critical areas, Mr. Plaut. The first one would be the evolving political and security landscape in Tigray and TPLF's struggle between unity and fragmentation. Second one would be the shifting alliances of Amhara's Fano movement, and third, Eritrea's regional posture, including its troubled relations with Ethiopia and its engagement with the US. And the fourth one would be the humanitarian catastrophe in Tigray's IDP camps, where starvation in places such as Hitsats has raised grave accusations of weaponizing hunger. So, Mr. Plaut, it is a privilege to have you back with us. Welcome once again to Arma Media.
It's great to be with you. I'm always pleased to be on your service, and I hope I can help you. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of the things that you're going to ask me about, you know much better than I do about what's going on, since you are in Tigray and I am not.
Okay, we'll see. In case you have anything that you would like to ask me, yes, I'm here to reflect on them. So let me start as usual from a more general question. Since our last conversation over 2 months ago, how would you characterize the current political, economic, social, and security landscape in Tigray? What significant developments, whether positive or negative it could be, have defined this period? In your view, is TPLF consolidating unity and restoring public confidence, or is it instead falling into fragmentation, leaving the people of Tigray increasingly exposed to external pressures and internal disappointment, Mr. Plaut?
Well, you know, there haven't been, as far as I can tell, any huge developments, but I mean, maybe I just haven't been looking closely enough. I mean, the situation is obviously evolving all the time, and, you know, there's some obvious things that are happening, which are, you know, difficult to understand. And I mean, these are, in a sense, some of the things that really you're in a better position to talk about than I am. But I mean, you know, the obvious ones are, you know, the relationship that has developed between the Tigrayan leadership, the TPLF leadership, and Eritrea, which is something that was a big surprise, and that led to, you know, other attempts to form organizations from inside Tigray who are working with the Ethiopians and are trying to, you know, well, they say they are fighting for democracy in Tigray, and you know, I am not sure how much of an impact they're going to make. I mean, you know, one of the things that the TPLF does have on their side clearly is, you know, they go back to the 1970s. So you have what, 30 plus, whatever it is, where we now 2026, nearly, you know, 50 something years of relationship between the TPLF and the people of Tigray, and you don't throw that away in 5 minutes. So there would be a strong loyalty amongst people, but I mean, that loyalty has been tested not only by, you know, divisions within the TPLF, but also by the conduct of the tragic war that ended, you know, a couple of years ago now, at least formally. You know, and that is, you know, I mean, the terrible sacrifices that families were asked to make of sending their children to go and fight for the government. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what did they achieve apart from having bodies? So those are big problems. And then you have Getachew Reda and his, you know, his people who are more aligned to the government in Addis Ababa. These things are, of course, pulling the people apart. You know, who is going with one side, who's going with the other side. But I mean, in a sense, you are in a much better position to answer the question of how this is developing, and in particular, which way the armed forces, who are still, although they have had their many of their heavy weapons have been surrendered to the government in Addis and Prime Minister Abiy. I'm sure they have others, and they have all their light weapons. So, in a sense, which way are they going to go? Are they going to be loyal to one faction or the other? And that I don't know.
You said there are people in Addis Ababa, such as Getachew Reda and some other guys with him, who are pulling the people apart. What do you mean by pulling the people apart?
Well, if you say, look, it used to be that the TPLF was the one organization that pretty ruthlessly but effectively held Tigray together. I mean, there were smaller factions, and but the TPLF won all the elections. Now you can argue about how fair those were, and were they a real reflection of the will of the Tigrayan people? And I can't answer that. I'm afraid free and fair elections in Africa are, well, as we say in English, as rare as hen's teeth. In other words, they hardly ever happen. And I mean, I think we are tomorrow going to see a completely rigged election in Uganda, for example. I mean, I wouldn't even use the word election for it. I mean, if Bobby Wine wins in Uganda, I will be very, very surprised, because they've already switched off the internet. They've got all the bits and pieces ready to proclaim a victory. And there are many governments like that across Africa. So that is a rarity if it was a fair reflection. Now, I can't judge whether it was or wasn't. I wasn't in Tigray at the time, but people that I've spoken to have expressed, shall we say, skepticism about how fair it was. Nonetheless, the TPLF has won all these elections and has shown itself to have a lot of support amongst a lot of people. Perhaps more in the rural areas than the urban areas, but that's for people to judge, not for me. That was one situation that existed with the TPLF, a really homogenous, pretty homogenous representation of the people of Tigray. Now, there have, of course, been splits over the years, and people have defected to the opposition at various times, but on the whole, it has remained united. And, the problem is now we have a completely different situation where there's a deep crack down the middle of Tigray, and there are not just one or two organizations, there are many that say that they claim to represent the people of Tigray in various ways.
But some commentators in this regard say that Tigray was known to be a one-party system. So the people in Addis, you already mentioned, such as Getachew Reda and his friends, should be better seen as alternative voices for the people of Tigray. So
I would say that that's a perfectly fair and legitimate claim. That they are representing democracy. It's if you look at a coin, it has two sides, and you can look at it one way and you can say they are representing democracy. If you turn it on the other side, you can say, oh, goodness me, they're not representing democracy. They are splitters. They're dividing our people. So, these are all the kind of, you can always interpret these in different ways. I'm not trying to make a judgment on this. I'm just observing that these things are happening. The other thing one can say, of course, is that there's been lots of revelations and lots of accusations about gold and the role of gold and the way in which that is being exported, particularly from the north, but other areas as well, and that is under control of people who are, shall we say, close to the military, and that they are making huge sums of money out of this, and that this will prepare them for, shall we say, another round of fighting, perhaps. As I say, I don't have hard evidence on this. I'm merely pointing to reports which have been coming out for some time. This would act as a way of, shall we say, financing any development that might take place?
You didn't properly address my question. Is TPLF, since our last interview 2 months ago, consolidating unity and restoring public confidence, or is it instead falling into fragmentation, leaving the people increasingly exposed to external pressure and international disappointment? Is a very critical question, Mr. Plaut.
It's a critical question. It's one I can't answer. As I say, I'm not in Tigray. You're in much better position to answer this question than I am. You know, and that I just cannot answer it. I'm sorry. It's not something I can deal with.
Okay, a senior Fano leader, if you might have heard, who recently surrendered to the federal government, stated that his decision was driven by a desire to avoid handing over the Amhara people to Shabiya and the TPLF. You have the information about this guy.
I must say I hadn't heard that. I can believe it. It seems the Fano were allied to the Eritreans. They were supported by the Eritreans during the war. You know, the war against Tigray. And you know, if the TPLF have moved now to the being closer to Eritrea, then that is certainly possible. It sounds plausible. But I mean, you know, that seems like one small development, because I mean, the main development, of course, is the fighting which has been going on now so terribly and so severely between the Fano and the Amhara people and President Abiy, I mean Prime Minister Abiy. So I mean, you know, that is the main development that has been continuing. I mean, but you know, all of these are very close-up issues, and you know, difficult to judge from outside the area.
I was to ask you anyways a question about the shifting in alliance with regard to that guy who surrendered to the federal government. How should we interpret this declaration in the broader context of Fano's pursuit of both tactical and strategic alliances, and what does it reveal about its evolving political calculus? Because in our introduction we already said that this action clearly indicates Fano is playing politics both tactically and strategically. Yeah, that's the question.
Are you surprised? I mean, why shouldn't they play politics like everybody else? Everybody plays politics. I mean, everybody acts on their own behalf and pushes their agenda the best way they can. I mean, for example, the Blue Brigade, as they were called in Eritrea, made a tactical alliance with Prime Minister Abiy. And, you know, there were times suggestions that they were going to actually form a military wing that might operate out of the Afar region. And they went and they met the Afars, and there were suggestions that they were going to get that moving. But, you know, nothing much has been heard of that recently. So, you know, there are lots of developments like that which you could look at. I mean, the other thing that one has to look at carefully is are the other actors outside of the region doing? I mean, let me give you one example. The United Arab Emirates, the UAE, has been sponsoring various groups around the region. For example, they supported the RSF and General Hemeti in Sudan. And they did that in order to break up Sudan, because they would like to see smaller and fragmented states across the region. They also support Somaliland. They don't recognize it formally, but they do so. You know, they have a base in Basaso. So all of these things are happening all at the same time. These are the things. Now, I can't tell you which side the UAE is going to support in a potential conflict. And I'm not saying that there is going to be a conflict. I'm saying a potential conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea. which would certainly involve or could involve the sweep up the Tigrayan people in this fighting again. Which side would Tigray be on? Would they be on the side of Abiy, or would they be on the side of Hitsats? I have no idea.
Do you think Fano's new alliance with Abiy, like you mentioned earlier, tactical or strategic?
I don't know what you're trying to say by that because I don't see them as being particularly important. I mean, what's you could call one thing one day and sometimes the yes. I mean, what do you think it is?
As a journalist, better not to take any position in this regard because I'm here in Ethiopia, Mr. Plaut.
Okay, I understand. But I mean,
Yeah.
you can do something as a tactic one day and it can become a strategy the next day. So, I mean, what's the difference?
Depending on time, place, and condition, you mean, right?
Exactly. So you can change your mind if you're in these positions. I don't know. I don't know enough to be able to answer these questions. Are absolutely fair ones. I'm not arguing that they're not, but I do not have I'm not close enough to the story to be able to answer it, with any authority. And then, let's be honest. We have, at the same time as all this is happening in the Horn of Africa, and I mentioned the role of the United Arab Emirates. You then also have the much wider disruptive relationship which President Trump has with the rest of the world. I mean, I can't even tell you if President Trump is going to support Ukraine or oppose Ukraine. I can't tell you if he's going to send troops to invade Greenland or not. And these things have been on the agenda for weeks now. And his role in relation to Iran, he has said explicitly that the leadership in Iran will pay a high price. Does that mean he's going to send troops into Iran? I haven't the faintest idea, nor can anybody else outside of his immediate circle. So, the situation is so much in flux, and the rule of law and the role of the United Nations and the role of the international, what used to be called the international order, is so undermined that trying to understand where things are going to be developed when these, shall we say, micro issues that you've been focusing on, which are completely legitimate to focus on, I'm not arguing against it. It's just these things will be swept away by a huge, much larger development from the on the international stage. And I think that is what is so difficult, why prediction of any kind is so difficult. It's always difficult. But I think this is why it is so particularly difficult at the moment.
Okay. Let's proceed to questions related to Eritrea. In a recent interview, President Isaias Afwerki has publicly expressed that Eritrea's efforts to initiate a new engagement with the United States have been hampered. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of State has highlighted that Eritrea's investment climate remains deeply unfavorable to American involvement. So, noting not only that, it also noted a range of concerns in this regard. How do you characterize the trajectory of U.S.-Eritrea relations to date, and what direction do you anticipate this relationship taking in light of these contrasting positions, Mr. Plaut?
I mean, clearly the relationship between the United States and Eritrea have fluctuated down the years. I mean, you may remember that a previous United States ambassador or actually the consul to Eritrea, had some very, very tough things to say about the Eritrean government and how useless they were. And he said it, from an official website. So, I mean, that was quite amazing. And they seemed to warm a bit when Trump came in, again for the second time now. But the Eritrea is now on one of many countries on a list of nations from Africa who cannot get permission to travel to the United States anymore. I mean, so they have been barred. you know, there's just really, it's hard to even see a flicker of a relationship between the two countries any longer. And you know, that is really the background to everything that is happening now in that relationship. It is as cold as it could be. And you know, I think Prime Minister Abiy has a better relationship with Washington than President Isaias. And President Isaias is certainly happy to make rude remarks about anyone in the world, except interestingly, he almost never says anything rude about Russia. And he never said anything rude about the Soviet Union. That's the one thing that's worth remembering. I mean, in the interview that you talked about, his once a year interview, his annual interview, the President Isaias, you know, he described, what was it, the PP as lazy, bankrupt, cowardly, and greedy, and just said, you know, and he said he laughed at the remarks that they made and the you know, threats that were coming from Addis, and said, you know, don't even think about it, just get on with your own work, don't worry about it, you know, we can deal with anything we have to, and you know, that's been his public attitude. I mean, what he's doing privately, I'm sure that the president is trying to buy weapons, assemble his forces, get ready for a conflict if a conflict comes. I mean, he has a large, you know, trained military that he can use, or he's used so often, and he doesn't care about losing troops. So, you know, in that sense, President Isaias is in quite a good position, and you know, and you know, his enemy, in a sense, if it is Ethiopia, is more divided than it has been before, because it's not just that Tigray, you know, the parts of Tigray are now sort of on his side, or at least apparently so. But, you know, the difficulty for Prime Minister Abiy is that he has, you know, problems in so many other areas. It's not just in the Afar region. I mean, in the Amhara region, it's not just there. It's in the Ogaden, and in lots of other parts of Ethiopia. So these are all complexities. I mean, I don't underestimate the strategic significance that Prime Minister Abiy has. I mean, he has you know, drones at his disposal now. He's capable of production of drones, which are incredibly important in conflicts. I mean, you could see that repeatedly in the Tigray war, the role that they played. So there is a lot that's on his side, but you know, he has problems in trying to mobilize all these issues.
You mentioned his interview as his annual interview, right? What does that imply? What does that mean?
It's very simple. He doesn't give a damn about telling the Eritrean people what he's thinking or what he's doing. He doesn't give a damn whether the world likes him or not. He doesn't give a damn what anybody thinks about him. And that's been his great strength for so many years. I mean, you know, Isaias has cultivated good relations with first the Soviets, then the Russians. He likes to keep good relations with some of his neighbors across the Red Sea if he can, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries if he can. And he looks carefully across at the situation in Sudan, where he has better relationship with the military than he does with the RSF. You know, so he in a sense is on that side, while as Prime Minister Abiy is clearly on the side of the RSF and Hemeti. I mean, may that develop into something more as this terrible, terrible war in Sudan continues. I mean, it's so little reported on. It's tragic. That, you know, it is so difficult to understand what's going on. The millions of people who flee from it, the hundreds of thousands who've been killed. It's just an appalling war. I mean, all wars are appalling, but I mean, this is a particularly bad one. So where's that going? We don't know. But I mean, it looks as if Eritrea is on the side of the army, and Ethiopia is on the side of the RSF. That would suggest that Ethiopia is closer to the UAE, while as the Eritrea is probably closer to the Saudis. We'll see how this develops. Because I mean, there's one thing that has been suggested, and this would be interesting for you to think about. There was a very good interview which was put out by the editor of the Middle East magazine, in which he said the real strategy of the UAE for years now has been a simple one: break up, divide, subdivide, and make your enemies easier to deal with and neighboring countries easier to deal with. Plant your bases in these countries, use the ports as a way of getting in, and keep them under your control. And that is and there's a suggestion that the Israelis do the same thing. They also want to divide. So there was a suggestion that the Israelis and the UAE have the same kind of analysis of the region, and that the Saudis have woken up to this finally. Although bin Salman was actually a product of the UAE, and that now they are determined not to allow them to play games in the region in the way in which they have in the past. Now, how this develops, I don't know. We'll see.
Who do you think is creating a fertile ground for the UAE to realize its dreams around the region?
I don't think the UAE needs to have help from anybody. They've got plenty of money from their hydrocarbons, from their oil reserves. They've got plenty of resources. They have weapons. They can buy any weapon systems they like. They have a good relationship with the Israelis, and they can get them from the United States. But the United States also has assets there. So they're in a very, very good position, very powerful. They can play any game that they want. Until the Saudis. The Saudis is the only group that really are in a position to oppose them and to stand up to them. And we'll see how that develops.
From President Isaias Afwerki's recent interview, what key observations did you draw? Some commentators suggest that his tone reflected shock at the U.S. actions against Nicolas Maduro, driven by a fear that he himself could be the next target. So how do you interpret this perception, and what does it reveal about Eritrea's current posture toward Washington?
I don't think that one can be certain about anything like that, because I mean, I don't think that Washington cares very much about what is going on. I mean, look, if one's going to be realistic about the situation, there are only two things you can be sure about. Well, three things that you can be sure about in the region. The first is the United States has spent a lot of time and energy working on Sudan with no great effect. They've tried to end the war. They've put quite a lot of time and effort into it, and at quite a high level. It hasn't worked. Maybe it will, but at the moment it hasn't. The second thing that is true is that they are determined to try and crack down on the various Islamist groups in Somalia or Somaliland, and they have attacked them on several occasions under the current Trump administration. So that they were determined to. And the third thing, it seems to me, is that their primary relationship, like all American governments, is with Ethiopia and not with the other countries of the region, because they think Ethiopia is the biggest, and they are right. And for that reason, they don't really take anything else terribly seriously. So their concentration really is on continuing their relationship with Ethiopia rather than any kind of, shall we say, places like Eritrea, which are, in their words, in their view, fairly insignificant. As I said, I think last time, Eritrea doesn't cause Washington or London or Paris any problems, They don't like the government, but who cares? It doesn't hurt them. So, and all governments act on their own interests. So my view is, I don't think they care very much.
Okay, hundreds of IDPs have already died from starvation in Hitsats and other campuses in Tigray. Aid agencies and survivors consistently report that the federal government is deliberately obstructing humanitarian assistance, weaponizing hunger as a tool of collective punishment, a continuation of genocidal intent against the people of Tigray. Given this overwhelming evidence, how do you explain the government's role in turning food into a weapon of war against civilians?
Well, if you were sitting in Addis and you were Prime Minister Abiy, what incentive, apart from obvious humanitarian incentives, are there for you to help the people of Tigray? As far as he's concerned, the TPLF is, or at least a major faction of the TPLF is now working with his enemies in Amhara, or at least being close to them. So from the point of view of Prime Minister Abiy, leaving aside the humanitarian issue, which I don't think is what drives him, well then why not? Why not try and make life more difficult for the people of Tigray? And if that involves cutting aid, well, why not? It's just cynical. I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I mean, it's awful.
So you mean, or you are saying that it's obvious to see a government to cut aid to such people, innocent people, or civilians in refugee camps if they quarrel with groups just like or such as TPLF in the Tigray context, right?
Well, it happens in all conflicts.
But is it fair to punish civilians because you are quarreled with a political group, TPLF in the Tigray, in our context now? Is that fair? Is it legal, Mr. Plaut?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to tell you whether it's legal or illegal. It's illegal, but when I was a little boy, my mother said to me, never ask me whether it's fair or not. Do something about it. There's no point in asking whether it's fair. People will do things to you which are awful, and they have done for years, so there's no surprise with that.
In light of the public reactions and the critics regarding your position on Tigray genocide, is there anything or any clarification or corrective perspective you would like to share with our audience today? Because in our previous interview, you stated that you didn't believe genocide had taken place in Tigray. Is that still your position today, or has your assessment shifted in light of subsequent developments? I trust you might have followed my recent interviews with Professor Alex Dual and Professor Shetel Tromble, both of whom, as you might have seen, testified that genocide did occur. So how do you respond to their conclusions, and what is your considered opinion on this critical issue?
Yeah, let me be absolutely clear, and I'll say three things about it. The first is that whatever I say next does not indicate that I think that there were not terrible, terrible killings, abuses, sexual abuse of Tigrayans during the war. Absolutely nothing. I think it was an awful war. I was prosecuted with great ruthlessness by both Eritrea, by the Ethiopians, and supported by sections of the Amhara. So nothing I would ever say would undermine my conclusion that hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans were brutally killed and brutally murdered in that. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that other people are welcome to define genocide however they like. I use the original decision, the original definition of genocide, which is a simple one, which is that it is the aim of the government or authority that is inflicting genocide to eliminate a people in its entirety, to kill every single last person. If you look at the most famous ones, you know, in Rwanda, in the among the Armenians, or amongst the Jews, you will see that is exactly what happened. For example, the Tutsi killed every single, the Hutu killed every single Tutsi that they could find. The Nazis killed every single Jew they could find. So it wasn't a question of sort of, well, we'll leave this group aside. The aim of genocide is the total elimination of an ethnic group. That is the original definition of genocide, and this is the one that I still use. And this is precisely for that reason that I do not use the term genocide in relation to Tigray. Not because I don't think that there were tragic events, not because I don't think there were brutality and murders. I completely accept that there were, and I completely accept the complicity and the responsibility of the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea in inflicting these on the people of Tigray. I want to make that absolutely clear. But I do not use the word because I also know that there were many hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans who were in places where, like Addis Ababa, who could have been killed by the government in Addis Ababa. Did they kill them? No. Did they put them in camps? Yes, they did. Did they treat them very badly? Yes, they did. Were people frightened? Yes. But were they killed? No. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I do not use the term genocide. But it doesn't mean that I underestimate the suffering inflicted on the people of Tigray by both governments and by other organizations during that war. I hope that's clear.
Mr. Plaut, what about those major speeches, press releases, NGO reports, media articles, and the videos that exactly call the atrocities in Tigray as genocide? We can mention, for instance, the New Lines Institute in its, I think, June 4, 2024 report has given this title to its report, in other words, Genocide in Tigray, Serious Breaches of International Law in the Tigray Conflict, Ethiopia, and Paths to Accountability. This is just to mention one from among many others. We can continue anyways. Physicians for Human Rights and Organization for Justice and Accountability in the Horn of Africa describes it as a systematic sexual violence amounting to crimes against humanity and indicates the possibility of genocide in some findings based on medical or forensic evidence. We can continue, we can count. I can send you links of almost 30, 40 sources in this regard, reports, speeches, media outlets, videos. So don't you agree with all these reports, Mr. Plaut?
The answer is yes and no. So yes, in the sense that I accept all of their findings, or most of their findings, in terms of the atrocities and the abuse and the sexual abuse. I accept all of that. The only thing I do not do is use the word genocide, and I've explained why. Because there was not evidence that every single Tigrayan was killed. That's the only reason. But I accept all of the evidence of suffering. It's just I use a different way of describing it. You want to call it war crimes? Fine. You want to call it brutality? Fine. You want to call it sexual abuse? Fine. It's only the word genocide that I do not use, because I use the word genocide in the way that it was originally defined, not in the way that it's defined now.
So, in other words, you agree that the word genocide?
Yes, that's the only thing that I mean, I can't go through every single report and say, well, they're right about every single thing. But on the whole, in the main, I accept all the findings. I wrote about these findings. I published about them for years about what was going on. It's only the word genocide that I don't use for a definitional reason, because I look at it in a different way.
We deeply appreciate your insights and the time you have shared with us. If you have anything that you would like to say or to add, be it a comment or advice, recommendation whatsoever, let me give you the chance.
Well, I would just like to send my very best wishes to the people of Tigray and of course to the rest of the Horn who celebrate Christmas. I know you've finished it now, but I mean, we celebrated when you did. I mean, I wish you well for the year ahead, and I hope that the difficulties that you have personally and in Tigray as in general will be reduced, and I hope that you do not have another conflict in the year ahead. I mean, that's the last thing that we need in not just, of course, in the Horn of Africa, but anywhere in the world.
Thank you very much indeed once again, Mr. Plaut.
It's a pleasure. Good to be with you.